Hey guys, this is Woodshop Junkies and this is the Festool TS55 REBQ track saw. A few months ago I was gifted this saw by Top Dog Tool Shop, and you guys may have even noticed it in the background of some of my more recent videos. And since getting it, I had the opportunity to play around with it a bit and see if all the hype around the saw is actually justified. Now before I get into it, I do want to mention, as a hobbyist woodworker, I follow many woodworking forums, and it seems that most people agree it is a nice saw, but the debate comes in whether it is nice enough to justify the price tag, because let's be honest, they aren't cheap. Some people feel that a person would be able to produce similar cuts with a cheap circular saw and a makeshift guide rail, a more laboured exercise but definitely a cheaper one. So in today's video I want to take a look at the saw features and usability, but most importantly the cut accuracy and quality, to determine if they add enough value to justify the price of the saw. But before I do, I want to show you what I got in the box. The TS55 track saw came in the Festool Sustainer locked together box that can be stacked with other units for storage and transportation purposes. The box is also designed to protect against dust, spray water and shock. Then the saw came fitted with an HW48 fine-tooth Festool blade. And an interchangeable power cord that can be used with other Festool products is also supplied. In the box you will also find a splinter guard and of course the aluminium guide rail. Right, now before I jump in and do a few cuts, I first want to look at some of the features of the saw and what they are claimed to offer the user, starting with the aluminium track or the guide rail, because without it the TS55 is just a fancy circular saw. The one that came with my saw is the 1400, as in 1400 millimeters, but they are available in other lengths ranging from 800 up to 5000 and can be joined together, but a joining bar set would need to be purchased separately. Now for me personally, having a bunch of short ones is a better option that I can join together when I want to make a long cut, because this simplifies storage and transportation. Now the track is obviously designed to guide the saw and to do so with as little resistance as possible. To achieve this, the slideway linings are installed over here, which are claimed to allow the saw to run as if lubricated. And it does a pretty decent job of it, even when downwards pressure is applied on the saw. I am a little bit concerned about the longevity of the seemingly fragile material, but they can be purchased separately and replaced. How often this needs to be done? Well, I'm not exactly sure yet, because I have been using my saw for a few months and they still seem fine. Then on the underside of the rail you will notice these two adhesive strips that can also be purchased separately and replaced if needed, and they serve two very important purposes. Firstly, to grip the workpiece to prevent the rail from shifting or sliding while cutting, especially when downwards pressure is applied. Because they are made of a soft sponge-like material, they also protect the workpiece from damage like scratches. Also on the underside of the track you will find a splinter guard, which is a silicone-like strip that sits right up against the blade while cutting in an attempt to prevent splintering, and it works pretty much like a zero clearance insert on a table saw. Now when the track or the strip is used for the first time, it actually overlaps the blade, and the saw is used to trim the excess to ensure that the strip is actually right up against the blade. The splinter guard is also a cut line indicator, which for me is one of the nicest features of using a track saw, because it eliminates the need to consider the base width like you would with a normal circular saw. Because the splinter guard runs right up against the blade, it is a visual representation of where the blade is going to cut. So when setting up the guide you would simply place it on the marked cut line on your workpiece and you're pretty much ready to start cutting. Another feature of the rail is these two inverted slots, which are intended for expanding functionality by accommodating a variety of accessories and add-ons. Things like the joining bars or clamps to better secure the rail. There's stuff like a combination bevel with angle increments for setting up repeatable, accurate angled cuts. But I obviously can't go through all the accessories, so I will post links in the description of this video if you guys want to see what's available. Right, so the rail seems to have been developed with a bit of engineering foresight, because it allows for the expansion of tool functionality through add-ons. Next up, I'm going to take a look at the saw itself. Right, so the TS55 is a 1200 watt hand operated saw with no load speeds ranging from 2000 to 5800. It has a cutting depth of 55 millimeters at 0 degrees and 43 at 45 degrees. It is available in a 1600 watt version that increases the cutting depth to 75, called the TS75. In the case of the TS55, the saw operates with a 160mm or 6¼ inch 48 fine-tooth blade with an ATP tooth arrangement, and to fit and remove the blade, the operator would lift the plunge lock and plunge the saw till it clicks into place. When the spindle aligns with the access window, the operator can use the hex key supplied with the saw to fit or remove the blade. After which the operator would once again disengage the lock and return the saw to home. Behind the blade is a spring-loaded retractable riving knife, which is an important feature when scoring boards or creating cuts that aren't all the way through the workpiece, because if this was fixed, it would obstruct such cuts. Then depth and angle increments are displayed on the saw, and to set the depth stop, the operator would push and slide it to the desired position. Fine adjustment can be done by turning this knob over here, but the main function of this knob is actually to offset the zero when a recondition or replacement blade is used. The depth stop also has two indicators, because the one is with the guide rail and the other without. To set the cut angle, the operator would disengage the lock knobs found on either side of the saw with about 1/4 turn. Then manually tilt the saw to the desired angle before re-engaging the knobs. Now, the two lock knob system is claimed to improve cut quality by making the saw more stable. And the angle increments range from -1 for undercuts, which can be achieved by disengaging this lock, up to 47, and the 0 can be calibrated by adjusting this grub screw over here. The saw comes supplied with a viewing window installed to give the operator a view of the blade while cutting, but in cases where splintering needs to be limited on the off-cut end of the cut, this can be removed by pulling it out and installing the splinter guard. And it works pretty much just like the splinter guard on the guide rail, but just obviously on the opposite end. Right, so I think that covers most of the important features of the saw, and before I get to the fun stuff and actually start doing a few cuts, I just quickly want to run through some of the electronic safety features that come built into the unit. The saw comes with a built-in soft start feature for smooth startups, and the speed can be controlled with the knob at the back here. The saw also has an electronic brake to ramp down the motor when the trigger is released, but all of this is pretty standard features in what can be considered a high-end power tool. The features that set this apart, in my opinion, is the fact that it's got thermal or temperature and current overload protection to protect the motor. In a situation where the motor temperature increases above a safe level, the saw will throttle itself, allowing the motor to cool. And if current draw increases above a safe level, like with a blade jam, the saw will cut power to the motor until the jam has been removed. Right, so with all of that out the way, I can start cutting, and the first thing I want to check is the accuracy of the depth stop. Now setting up the guide rail, as I mentioned, is fairly straightforward. After marking my cut line, I will simply place the guide rail with the splinter guard lined up with the cut line. The piece on the fence side is obviously the piece I'm going to be working with or keeping for my project. Right, so that's pretty much it for the setup on the guide rail, and as I mentioned, I want to check the accuracy of the depth stop, so I'm going to set it to 5mm and create a cut in the piece of wood. Then I can check it with my vernier and see if it's actually accurate. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing this cut with the guide rail, so I'm considering this step and not this one. Right, so that's a slot cut, and now I'm going to check it with my vernier to see if it is actually 5mm. .99, and that should be impressive by anybody's standard. And there was no splintering, even though I didn't have the splinter guard installed. But this was a rib type cut, so I'm going to do the same cut on the cross cut and see if it still doesn't splinter. Right, so far no splintering on the rib and cross cut, which is impressive, but this is plywood. So next I want to try the same cut on a material that is notoriously difficult to cut. Right, so what I have here is chipboard veneer, and anybody that's ever tried to cut it would know that it is prone to chipping out. This is a cut I made with my table saw, and as you can see, it's pretty much chip marks all the way. So if this saw is as good as it's claimed to be, it should be able to produce a fairly decent cut, even in the veneer. For my first cut, I'm going to score the board without the chip guard in place. Right, so still no splintering, but I'm not cutting all the way through the board. So next up, I'm going to remove the depth stop and cut all the way through the board to maximize the chances of it splintering or tearing out. Right, so this time there was definitely tear out or chip out on the offcut side. The fence side obviously still has a splinter guard on the fence. Now the chip out is not bad, but it's still tear out. So next up I'm going to install the splinter guard or the outer splinter guard and do the same cut to see if it improves. Right, so with the external splinter guard installed, there is definitely an improvement on the discarded edge of the cut. Right, so far the saw does what it claims, but for my final test I'm going to create 2 angled cuts in a piece of hardwood. One rib cut and one cross cut. Right, so I can stand here making cuts all day, but the ones I've made should answer most of the questions a person would have about the saw. Is the cut quality good? Well, yes it is. I don't think there's much of an argument there, and the saw is very accurate as well. The saw is also fairly user-friendly, and I like that they've allowed for expansion through add-ons, and that certain components are interchangeable, like the rail that can be used with other Festool products. The saw did seem a little bit underpowered when I was cutting the hardwood because it required a slower feed, but it still managed to produce a good quality cut. In price it falls somewhere between my table saw and my miter saw, but it produces a better cut than both of them. So if I can only pick one, I'd probably take the track saw. But I'd love to hear what you guys think. The value of pretty much everything is subjective. For some, this saw would mean more than others. So let me know what you think. After seeing the demonstration, do you think the TS55's price is justified? Then before I finish off, I want to take a moment to thank Top Dog Tool Shop for their continued support of my channel. If you are a SA local in the Johannesburg area and you want to see a live demonstration of the saw or any of the other Festool products, you should not miss the big orange thing hosted by Top Dog at the end of this month. Besides Festool, they're also hosting 19 of the world's top brands, including Matabu, Makita, Milwaukee, Freud, Sawstop, Ikoki, and a bunch of other ones. And if you love power tools the way I do, you should not miss it. So I'll drop more info in the description of this video. But that's pretty much it from me. I will be back really soon with a new build, and if you want to see it, remember to subscribe. As always, thank you so much for watching. Till next time, cheers.